Well, Sam, thank you so much for helping my project. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm an author. I write under the pen name SC Gudzinski, but my full name is Sam Gudzinski. So you're welcome to call me Sam for the purposes of this interview. I'm also a University of Maryland senior mechanical engineering student. So I'll be graduating this spring and hopefully doing something to contribute to the future of space. As you know already, I'm a Space Hero Media insider, and that's a very new development that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I was just looking at your LinkedIn profile and I was listening to your narration of one of your short stories from 9 Million Mushrooms, 9 Million Marshmallows, sorry, marshmallows, uh,
I'm glad you found it. That's great to hear.
which actually I just bought on Amazon.
Oh,
So I'm looking
oh,
forward to reading the whole thing. But
thank
I,
you. I'm glad you. I hope you enjoy it.
yeah, it was the story of the person that did the time traveling and
Yeah.
you know, I thought that was a really a good short story. I think you could do a lot with that concept. So I'm kind of interested in exploring what you did with it.
Oh yeah. No, I'd be happy to do that. Did you get the chance to hear the full story or just partial?
It was at the end of it, the main character decided to become a railroad conductor. So I'm not sure if that was just a teaser or that was
Yeah.
the end.
That's just the teaser. That's actually pretty early in the story. So that's actually one of the most interesting ones in the book, in my opinion. So the book has 10 stories, and that one's right around the middle. That's the longest story, and it's also one of few like real sci-fi stories in the collection. The title of the story is Blinkers, and it's based on the idea of people who can uh, effectively rewind themselves in time by blinking their eyes. So they can rewind to any point where they've been in their life previously. And the challenge of the story, the central conflict, comes from the fact that while we initially believe it's just one person who can do this, it turns out there are two, and that has a major impeding effect on timelines and their ability to live independent lives. Um, because when two people can force each other back in time and still remain conscious throughout it, that causes severe issues for them both.
I could just imagine them playing a game of chess together.
Yeah, and that's effectively what the story becomes later on. I won't spoil exactly how it turns out, but it's not pretty.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I was just listening to my countdown to the moon interview that I did a year ago. It was with a fellow parent at a tennis, um, tennis practice for children. And I hadn't met him before, and we struck up a conversation. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this project, and I'd like to interview about the moon. And he brought up two things that I had forgotten about from that interview. But the first one was us going back to the moon. What do we hope to get um, what do we hope to discover this time? What's new? Why do it? And as I was reading your LinkedIn profile, I was thinking you have kind of a really unique place as both a storyteller and an engineer to be able to really address people on kind of like a level that they can understand and really get not so much give them a bulleted list of why we should go back, but make them feel that going back is necessary. And I was wondering, um, in terms of your storytelling, have you kind of looked into this a little bit more?
Yeah, I was thinking about this in the lead up to this interview, and it occurred to me that my perspective on travel in space, but especially to the moon and looking to the future to Mars, has always been that for most people, the vast majority of people in the world, this sort of adventure is a story. Even though it is real and even though it is actually happening, people around the world experience it as a story being told to them in real time or after it's happened. If you look back at the 60s and 70s, our perspective on the moon landings now, it's like mythology. I mean, some people think it actually is mythology. Some people don't believe it actually happened. Um, so I think the responsibility of storytellers, uh, and that's a broad definition of storytellers. Everyone in media, everyone who talks about space travel becomes a storyteller in the legacy of space travel. I think all of those people have a duty to tell the story responsibly and to make it accessible to as many people as possible and to make it such a story that people believe in it to the degree that they don't need very explicit technical reasoning for why we should be doing it. Um, it's it's something that's awe-inspiring if it's told correctly and if it's depicted correctly. And that's my hope for 2024 or whichever year the landings end up happening. Um, I really hope that people find their own reasons for why we're doing it in the story that they experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the reason a city bus goes from one part of town to another is because there's people on there with a whole bunch of different reasons for going between those two parts of towns. And no one's like, are you going there for the same reason I'm going there? It's like, no, I need to go there to do shopping, see the doctor, see my aunt. I haven't been in that part of town before. I'd like to go. Uh, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it means something different to everyone. And I know for a lot of people, it doesn't mean very much. There are many, many people out there, people I know even, who believe that we shouldn't go back to the moon. Lots of people believe it's a waste of money, that there are so many other very relevant and pressing causes here on Earth that we need to be focused on. So I can understand how people feel excluded by it. And I think that we need to listen to those people as well, because that's the only way that this can be a combined experience for all of humanity, is if we also listen to the detractors who haven't yet found a reason for doing it.
Yeah, and I think detractors come in sort of two flavors. You have uh, the detractor distractors, which are the people who are detractors for the purpose of getting attention onto their story, and then you have like the genuine detractors who are just, that's somebody else's story. What does it have to do with me? I mean, I think there was a song in 1969 about written by a black musician about whiteys being on the
But he's
moon.
on the moon. Yeah.
Whitey's on the moon. Yeah. So I mean, there is a direct, tangible, visual example of somebody who felt excluded from the
Mhm.
story.
Yeah, that actually that poem was used in the film First Man, starring Ryan Gosling, about Neil Armstrong. I don't know if you've seen the. I figure you have. Um,
I think I did. I don't
yeah.
remember. I mean, I've seen so many space movies; it all kind of blends in at some point.
Oh yeah, it does for sure. But yeah, in that film, there's a scene right leading up to the launch of Apollo 11, I think, where they have that artist. His name escapes me, but performing that spoken word poem, and it's really powerful. I think to witness one story happening simultaneous to another. It really puts that time period in perspective. And in the end, it is all the same story. It connects directly.
Absolutely. And right on the bookshelf in front of me, I have a book entitled "Right Stuff, Wrong Sex," which is
Yeah.
about I guess the Mercury 7 is what they were called, or the
Yeah, yeah. Mercury 7. Another great space movie and book, by the way. um, but yeah, that's another thing looking forward into 2024, that NASA has so specifically and repeatedly stated that the next person to walk on the moon will be a woman. Um, and I think that's long overdue. I mean, there's even been now there's a TV show For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus that uh, envisions an alternate history in which the space race was extended because the Soviet Union got there first, and in that alternate history, NASA actually diversifies much more quickly, and we see both male and female astronauts uh, in the 60s and 70s walking on the moon. And man, it really surprisingly makes me yearn for certain alternate timelines. You know, there are so many other ways that everything could have gone.
The cinematography uh, and kind of like the props in that movie are so real that
Yeah,
I think if you put it up against a real documentary and to somebody that had no clue about what really happened, I think they'd be really challenged to figure out which one was true.
yeah. That's something I have thought about as well. I mean, I don't know if you can see behind me, but I have a poster for the movie Galaxy Quest on my wall,
Hmm.
and that's effectively the same story. An alien species watching American television and believing it's a true story.
It's I remember like North Korea at one point, their news was commenting on an Onion article.
Yeah.
It's just like it's really difficult. And a lot of our jokes are funny because of sort of the tension they create.
Mhm.
But when those jokes become common and people grow up with just the joke, but not what the caused the tension, it no longer is funny, but just becomes normal. It's just kind of interesting how society evolves.
Yeah, that's true. Humor does change over time, and it's so easy to misinterpret sarcasm and satire, especially on the internet these days, because so much tone is lost through writing.
Um, and talking about storytelling, one common aspect of it is exactly what's the primary conflict that needs to be resolved in the story, and who are the players in that conflict, that primary conflict. You have kind of like person versus person versus himself, person versus group, group versus group, person versus nature, that type of thing. And I think one problem that we've had with the story of space development and exploration, it's largely been person versus person or group versus group. And, you know, um, in the interview I was watching from a year ago, it's really obvious to me that in the mind of the gentleman I was interviewing, it was all about achieving first. Once you've checked the box, you need to move on to that next box. It wasn't about actually developing space infrastructure and about humanity expanding sort of the sphere of human activity into the solar system. It was, I mean, it's like if you climb Mount Everest, why would you climb it again? That type of mentality. Shouldn't you climb Kilimanjaro or something? Uh, and I was wondering, kind of in your view of the future, um, I mean, what do you think should be the view of humanity in terms of space and development?
I think we need to continue to move boldly forward. Um, I think we need to do so responsibly. I think we need to take care of our fellow humans as well. Um, but I think the moment we stop looking upward and looking forward is the moment we stop growing and evolving as a species. Um, that's one of my biggest fears, that we've reached the maximum point of human achievement, that it's already happened and we're just sliding back down the mountain from here. Um, and that's a terrifying prospect. And I think the one of the surprising or I guess unexpected consequences of space travel is that when we make new discoveries and when we reach these new goals, we prove to ourselves over and over that we have not reached our greatest potential yet. And that's the most inspiring thing for the world, I think. It continues to show us that we're capable of more than we know. There's a one of my favorite TV shows is The OA, and there's a great scene where actually the antagonist in the movie talks about how for so many years it was believed no one could run a mile in under 4 minutes.
Hmm.
And then as soon as one person did it, within a few months, like five others had done it because it became possible after it was done once. And then that opened the floodgates for further achievement. So I think we need to keep pushing because we'll find that what we've reached is not yet the limit, that there is still more to go. And I feel like I've I've spiraled into a bit of a tangent here, but that's my outlook on the future, is that we're gonna keep discovering new things, or at least we really should. We should really keep trying to.
Yeah, definitely. That last point reminds me of a Henry Ford quote. He said, "Whether or not you believe you can or you can't, you're right."
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty much it. And it's kind of like whenever you think about reusability in rockets. I mean, SpaceX is doing their thing now. Everybody's trying to catch up with them, and
Yeah.
we just need people who believe in an idea enough to make it happen, to show people that it's possible, and then that changes everything.
It's the power of hindsight too. As soon as orbital first stages were landing on Earth, everyone realized, oh, we should have been doing that the whole time. Isn't that so obvious? I mean, that's also what happened with the iPhone in 2007. As soon as we had touchscreens and people typing on touchscreen keyboards, it became obvious that physical keyboards were vestigial, that we never needed to do that to begin with. Um, and the more we innovate, the more we'll have those moments of obvious hindsight.
Before you were talking about the fear that some people have that maybe we reached our peak, reminded me of another quote. The optimist proclaims that we live in the best of all possible worlds. The pessimist fears it's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Uh, you're a fellow Space Hero insider. How did you find out about Space Hero?
Well, every morning I read the news. I read a bunch of different outlets, just checking, particularly space news and other technology news. And it came across my feed during the last, I guess, the last media run that Space Hero was doing. And I thought, wow, that's such a cool idea. And I'd seen things like it before, and I'd seen those ideas thrown around in the past. But I was so worried that, it wasn't real, that it was just going to disappear and that it wasn't going to last. So then I had to do my own digging on it and find the Space Hero website, and then dig beyond that to the Space Hero LinkedIn page. And that's where I found the insider application. I said, okay, well, if I want to find out if this is legit or not, I'm just going to have to fill out this application, write my essays and everything. And what do you know? It's growing, and it's already happening.
Yeah, looking at the Space Hero website, it doesn't give you warm fuzzies about it being legitimate, right? In terms of email
Yeah.
address and a jot form for filling out a application.
Oh yeah, no, I had my concerns for sure. But no, from everything I've heard, I've been very reassured. It seems like the partnerships with so many other space organizations, like national space agencies from around the world, that's what really got me excited about it, because that made it seem heavily recognized as, a real player in the space industry in a
Well,
new sort of way too.
I mean, the challenge with that though is you have you don't have those agencies coming out saying about their support, right? It's like on the Space Hero side. But there are two things that make me think that Space Hero is legit. One is Moribaj Jha. I don't know if you know of him, but he's one of the Space Hero um, like spokespeople. He's a professor at the University of Texas in Austin, and he had spoken at our North Houston Space Society chapter a few months before. I was like, he's legit. And then Axiom Aerospace, in terms of they came out and made an announcement that confirming that they are working with Space Hero to actually arrange for the winner of the contest to go to International Space Station, and they're based in Houston. I was going to have somebody there come talk at the North Houston Space Society, but we started moving virtual, and at that point, I wanted to save all my Houston area people for back when they were physically meeting again. Um, so those two things really made me feel warm and fuzzy. And then of course talking to Deborah and the other people involved, it really looks like they have their stuff together. So I'm excited about this year.
Yeah, me too. Those onboarding calls were really built the enthusiasm for me, at least.
Um, Let's see, and have you heard about some other projects like Dear Moon?
Hmm. Yeah, I remember I was actually watching the live stream when that was announced. That was quite a day because a lot of announcements came out through that one event. Um, and what was the targeted year for
Uh,
that? Is that
2023.
2023? Yeah, I mean, it looks like that could definitely still happen. I mean, I've been following the Starship development at least every other day. I check in with the updates from NASA spaceflight and Boca Chica Gal and all the others who are taking the photos and documenting the progress of Starship down in Texas. Uh, so it seems like SpaceX is advancing steadily towards that goal of being able to orbit the moon in 2023. Um, and there are a lot of big milestones along that path. So orbital refueling, for one, is going to be a very daunting but exciting thing to see if they can pull that off. Because that really opens the doors to the rest of the solar system.
And then also rapid reuse. I mean, the idea of using the same vehicle 3 times a day to make trips is just, you know, unimaginable.
Yeah, when you're only talking about just fuel and maintenance costs, they said I think $2 million per launch, which is that those are small sat launcher numbers that are unheard of for a super heavy lift vehicle like nothing that's ever been seen before. They can carry I think 400 people, maybe even more. Um, it's it sounds like science fiction, and right now it is, but in a very short amount of time, it might not be.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you might be able to leave, Houston in the evening, go to Beijing for a lunch meeting and be back before the family wakes up.
Yeah, it only cost you $10,000, but you could probably do it.
Yeah. Also, whenever you think about pandemics and how quickly people can travel the world, you're like, it'd be almost impossible to contain anything that could spread.
Yeah, viruses spreading through space, and that's something we never would have expected, say, 10 years ago.
Exactly. Maybe the radiation uh, help reduce the number or something.
Yeah, disinfecting radiation. Oh, man, that's terrifying.
So when did you hear that we were planning to go back to the moon in 2024?
I really don't know. In fact, I can't even tell you exactly when that was announced, but I remember I remember being focused on like when I believed based on what I had seen from NASA that it was going to happen again. And I remember thinking, oh, it'll probably be in the 2030s. And then I was really impressed when I first saw that they were thinking about this decade. And then 2024 seemed very ambitious, but not uh, not a completely unexpected ambition from the current presidential administration. Um, but yeah, I still hope they're able to meet that goal, but I don't have too much faith in the SLS development, I gotta admit.
It looks like they're finally planning to launch Artemis 1 sometime late 2021.
Yeah,
I
November was the last I saw.
yeah, I think it's important they keep that date.
Yeah, no, if that date slips to 2022, I think we're definitely not gonna see uh, a landing in three between 3 and 4 years. Um, and also with the changing administration, I think it is pretty likely to see the target date slip. Um, and as disappointing as that is, for safety reasons, that may be for the better because we saw it with the space race that the real danger of space travel came from the rush to launch. We saw that with the shuttle program as well. So ambitious dates are great motivators, but they can also be very real dangers to the astronauts and to everyone involved, really. Um, this is explosives we're working with to travel into space. So we have to do it right, and I think doing it right is just as important as doing it in the first place.
Of course, if Elon's able to pull off the 2023 around the moon trip, I gotta think that that becomes like a regular thing he does. Like maybe yearly there'll be a voyage around the moon.
Yeah, we'd see a Dear Moon trip every year, or I mean, honestly, it would probably be more often than that after a while. Um, but yeah, that would be really embarrassing to NASA, especially if they don't select Starship as a human landing system.
But you got to imagine they're going around the moon. It's a free return trajectory, so like they don't have to get in the lunar orbit or anything. But
Yeah,
it's how much more would it actually take for them to be in orbit? And then how much more would it take for them to dock with a lander? And I mean, it's like
oh
yeah,
yeah,
it seems like that's really key to opening up the moon.
that's true. There are a lot of steps involved beyond just the free return trajectory, but I don't know. I feel like in the minds of so many people, especially people who aren't as well versed in space, if you see a spaceship going around the moon and people on board live streaming from it and taking pictures and viral Instagram photos from, you know, several hundred miles off the surface of the moon, that's going to lead a lot of people to believe that NASA is really lagging behind in their development, even if they might actually be ahead. Um, it would be a very bad publicity incident for NASA. I think if Dear Moon gets to the moon at all before Artemis does.
Eh, I think a lot of it depends upon how they kind of embrace it and stuff. I mean, on one hand, they could say it's a success story. They helped
Mm.
to sort of create the space to have a private set of space companies, Blue Origin and SpaceX and Intuitive Machines and Astrobotic and what have you, and that this is actually the results of that. And they've been making a shift from cost plus contracting over to this fixed bid services based thing. I I think there's an opportunity here for maybe part of NASA to transform all of NASA into more efficient kind of entity where they're focused more on sort of the science and the research and the fostering kind of groups of people.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you look at a great example of that is the bounty on lunar regolith, which I think is a great idea. You know, get there first and bring it back, and you win.
Well, you
Um,
don't have to bring it back. You just have to take a picture.
oh, you just have to take a picture
You
of it.
just have to take a picture. You have to scoop it up, take a picture, and NASA buy it from you
Huh.
to be picked up later.
Yeah, yeah. But that's really something. And I really hope we get to see a sort of mini space race just in that department. Um, I agree. I think no matter who makes it to the moon, I mean, between the U.S. commercial sector or NASA, uh, NASA will be able to take a great degree of credit for it. I mean, after all, they did it first. They did it more than 50 years ago. So yeah, they paved the way, and NASA's not going anywhere. That's for sure.
Um, what do you think about the Chinese? I mean, they clearly, while we're saying, the first woman and the next man, going to the moon sustainably and all this, and really kind of muddling, why are we going back? What are we doing? They seem very strategic. They're like, the moon's like the next South China Sea. If we don't get out there and start, physically have a presence, there's going to be a time where we won't be able to. And
Yeah, and I can see definitely where that would come from. I mean, as it stands, I believe the Chinese space program is forbidden from using the International Space Station. I believe they're not a part of it at all. Um, and I think that also is connected to the destruction of satellites with missiles a few years back. I think was the reasoning for part of that, and the aggression of space travel from China is concerning. Um, but my hope is that somewhere along the way we're able to forge some sort of cooperation, and enter into more comfortable, more open agreements in regards to who can use the moon, who can be there, and who can share in the discoveries that are being made, share workspaces such as a lunar base. My hope is that the moon can be a unifying place for everyone. Realistically, it might not be, at least not at first, but I think even though it's less exciting without such dramatic conflict, it's better in the long run, and we're able to reach further that way.
It's all depends upon if the competition is constructive or destructive. Y-
Exactly.
in order to win a race, you only have to run faster than your opponents, and there's really two ways you can make that happen. One is by running faster, and the other one is by making them run slower somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, placing a stumbling block would would do the same trick for competition, but not so much for exploration.
It's like Super Mario Kart, the bananas and the turtle shells, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, well, in addition to kind of the challenges of getting the U.S. and China to work together on the moon and in space, you also have non-space powers who, maybe like that's great that you're doing all this. Eventually, our economies hope to get up to that point, and we hope to have a place in space. Um, they have no incentive necessarily for us to go quicker, right? I mean, in fact, they almost have an incentive to slow everything down, come up to par with the developed world, and then maybe they would be in a better spot. Uh, as we're trying to move out into space and create these types of agreements, how do we sort of manage that? I mean, how much do we try to get agreement with them versus have to say, well, obviously we're in different spots and we need to go do what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I know was a major talking point in the Space Hero onboarding. The inclusion of developing nations and developing nation space programs in the new space race, um, which I think is exactly what I'm looking for in the future, because that sort of cooperation and the involvement of new perspectives in this field is something we've never had before. I mean, the 1960s, there were only two players, and they were both major powers in the world. But now, with the world so interconnected, I think it would be illogical and even cruel to not involve countries that um, may not necessarily be able to financially contribute as much to the mission, or I mean, to the billions of dollars that go into the NASA budget, but it's just the right thing to do. I mean, if you look at all that the United Nations is able to accomplish, I mean, even just symbolically, what that represents for the world, that's the sort of spirit that I would hope can be brought beyond Earth, and not just left behind as we move outward.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, what about having an international astronaut corps where literally every country has an astronaut in this corps? I mean, to send them to the International Space Station is only $55 million, and to train them is probably a million or two. Um, so if you figure 60 million, there's what, 200 countries in the world, I think.
Yeah.
So that comes out to be like 1.2 billion, and you could literally have an astronaut from every country.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that would be amazing. I see that as a potential future timeline for something like Space Hero. I mean, if that's successful, if we're able to bring someone who otherwise couldn't go into space, uh, then that will lead to so many other commercial entities, I'm sure, who want to do something like that with an international cooperation of many astronauts.
Yeah, and maybe someday the UN will be set up in orbit. And
Oh yeah, I mean, can you imagine a UN space station? That's like every sci-fi movie.
but it's kind of a neat place for them to be, kind of above the Earth, having to think globally. It's
Yeah,
like they look out the window and they see Earth fragile, unified, special, and they're actually making their proclamations, and they're having to sit there and think. I mean, that almost seems like the ideal place to put the UN, actually.
yeah. The more I think about it, the more that makes a lot of sense. I would love to see that.
And plus it'd be neutral territory, so
Yeah,
um, every country could launch directly up there.
you're right. Travel by starship. The starship can just hop from country to country, picking people up, and then go up to the station in orbit. I mean, a
Abs-
lot of refueling involved in that, but still.
yeah, it'd be kind of neat. Hmm. And maybe like 3 or 4 starships just meet up in orbit. That may be enough
Yeah,
place for everybody. Um, so if it was safe and affordable, would you go to space?
absolutely.
Are you talking about like suborbital Virgin Galactic or New Shepard flight, or go to orbit, or go to the moon for a week or two, or a one-way trip to Mars?
I'd go as far as I can. I would do a one-way trip to Mars. Um, but I'd settle for whatever's available, basically, whatever I can afford in the future where it does become possible. Um, I've always been disappointed by the idea of suborbital space flight. I mean, functionally, it's there and it's exciting, but it's just not the same. Like I see that as a much more advanced level of basically riding a roller coaster. Whereas going to orbit or going to the moon or Mars, that's like traveling the world. That's going on a real vacation somewhere. So you can go to an amusement park or you can go to anywhere else. Um, and that's my take on suborbital space flight. I hope that it's something affordable for many people to experience, but I don't think it'll ever be a substitute for what else is out there.
It could be a great training thing, though. It's like, let's send you on a suborbital flight, 15 minutes of terror. If you survive it and like it, you go further. If not, well, it's 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And I mean, there's also a pretty big range of suborbital. I mean, you can have point to point suborbital with Starship, and that's much more time in zero gravity, so more effective for training as well.
And you're actually going someplace.
Yeah, exactly.
So even
Win-win.
if the UN delegates have to go to New York, the delegation from, China and India and Japan and Russia might be in orbit for, not in orbit, but have sort of that overview effect for at least a few minutes along their flight.
Yeah, I mean, what a great perspective to have right before a UN meeting.
All this could be mine. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, let's see, what else? I had a few other questions, but I lost them. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Um, I don't know. I didn't come with anything prepared really for subjects of conversation. I mean, of course, my favorite thing to talk about has always been storytelling because that encompasses so much. Um, So if you have any other questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. I've been writing for a long time, and I'm going to continue writing for a long time, I hope. So, uh,
What are some of your favorite authors?
that's a great question because honestly, I don't read as much as I used to. I don't know if that's just because of the accessibility of technology or just because I haven't had time in college, but I am as I know so many authors and readers alike would say this, but I am a big fan of Stephen King, genuinely, because as much as people think of him as a writer of scary stories, he's really a writer of strong characters and settings, and that's why people read it. People don't read his stories necessarily because they instill fear. I think people read them because they can connect to the stories. So that speaks a lot to the versatility of storytelling, that if you can connect people personally to what you're writing, they'll read whatever else you want to say as long as it's relevant. So that's what I've always liked about Stephen King's storytelling. Um, Other than him, I I watch a lot of TV shows and I watch a lot of movies. So my favorite storytellers are all screenwriters and directors. Um, Christopher Nolan, for instance. Interstellar is still my favorite film, 6 years strong. Uh, I just haven't found anything that quite reached the emotional impact that had on me, I think.
Did you see Firefly?
Actually, no, I still haven't seen Firefly. I have to go back and stream that one.
I really enjoyed it. Um, it's a shame it was only one season.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I've heard. Now they did a sort of finale movie, didn't they?
Yes, Serenity.
Hmm. Was that
Um,
any good?
yes, I've seen it probably 50 times.
Oh wow.
I know. Just
All right. Well,
sometimes.
I'll have to check that one out for sure. After
Um,
watching the show, of course.
have you thought about writing any screenplays?
I'm writing one now. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
so for the past year or so, I've been working on a novel idea. It's not science fiction. It's a mystery thriller. But it occurred to me recently that the format of my outline is perfect for a 10 episode limited series. So as I'm writing the novel, I'm hoping to also write the screenplay version of it. So I'll have both in hand when it's finished.
That's awesome. Have you read any John Scalzi?
No, I haven't.
I think you might enjoy him. He kind of of the Blinkers, the segment that I read. As I was listening to it, I was thinking uh, that he might be a writer that you would enjoy.
Hmm. How do you spell his name?
Scalzi is the last Sczali, I think. Scalzi.
Okay.
His most popular work is Old Man's War. John Scalzi. Yeah, Scalzi. Yeah, that's it. So
Got it.
yeah, Old Man's War is what he's most famous for. Um, and then an older author, Frederick Pohl, Pohl. Don't
Hmm.
know if you've heard of him, but he was very prolific. I've enjoyed some of his works too.
Okay, yeah. I'll have to look into both of those after the call.
So do you remember when you wrote your first story? Whenever you're like sat down and said, "Hey, I'm going to actually write a story."
It's really funny because I know I've been writing stories for a very long time because I do remember something I wrote uh, before I could ever even really spell correctly, I don't think. I remember writing a story about a moth that I found when I was outside my backyard as a kid. And I don't remember exactly what the story was about, but I know I wrote it all and illustrated it on just paper that was laying around in the house. And I think I probably would have been maybe 3 or 4 years old when that happened. So a long time that I've been either writing or trying to write stories.
That is Awesome. So you said 3 years old?
Or four. I don't really know. My mother's an English teacher, or at least she used to be. So she tried to get me reading at a very young age, and the writing aspect was part of that. So I was definitely led that down that path.
That is awesome. And how much per day do you find yourself writing, editing, uh, kind of outlining and all that?
Rarely as much as I want to. It's so hard. But my routine when it comes to writing tends to be that I'll sit down and I won't stand up until I've written everything I wanted to. So usually that comes out to at least 2,000 words in a day, and that's without going anywhere. Like I don't give myself breaks. I don't move away from the screen until it's all written the way I want it to be. So that can be 8 hours, and I have to I have to really prepare myself for that before it happens.
That sounds challenging. Do you have some like techniques that you use?
I do outline, particularly for larger projects. I can't say I really outlined for the short stories in 9 Million Marshmallows and More, but uh, the project I mentioned I'm working on, I have actually a giant spreadsheet that explains the whole plot in chronological order because it's written from five different perspectives and alternates between them, but all of the different characters interact with one another, and I have to tell all the events chronologically or it doesn't make sense. Um, so there's a lot of meticulous detail work that goes into that, but I find that that really helps when it comes time to sit down and write a chapter.
Yeah, I John Flanagan, he had come to a little local library where we were living at the time in New Hampshire. He had written a book, our children's series, or I guess teen series called Ranger's Apprentice. And he was talking a little bit about his process that, he carries a notebook around with him, and every time he thinks of something funny for one of his characters to say, he'll like write it down. And then he really like writes the chapter listing, and then kind of, each sitting he'll like write a chapter. It's like the sort of similar to what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I try to write one chapter at a time if I can.
Um, where do you hope your writing takes you?
Uh, I think there are so many possibilities. I mean, in terms of just the storytelling industry, I'd like to see something I write adapted for screen. I'd like to be involved in that someday. But mostly, I've realized what I find most gratifying is to just be able to talk about my writing. Um, I've told people that if I could do that every day, I would never actually write anything because that would be all I'd want to do. It's so incredible the feeling of putting an idea out in the world that's so connective and so potent to people that they will then talk about it with me, which is admittedly rare, especially because I haven't been publishing anything for very long. Uh, but I would like to be able to have conversations about stories and also to accept criticism, which is something I've gotten a lot better at. Um, I love when people are able to poke real holes in my stories because that's how I push myself to do better next time.
Yeah, I mean, and the great thing about stories is, you can adapt them and change them, and especially with how digital everything's become.
Right. I know so many authors who have published many different versions of their short stories. Like even older, respected authors I know have done that and have had multiple publications of the same story, even under different titles. There's one story in 9 Million Marshmallows and More that's called Tree of Life. And years ago, when I first wrote it, it was called Marvin's Tree. And it was a similar story, but really, really different. And the earlier draft of Blinkers was actually called The Temesian Fox, and it had this really obscure connection to Greek mythology that was used as a metaphor throughout it.
Hmm.
Um, and the first readers of it hated that, so I had to get rid of it.
That's that's interesting. But you know, like your audience of the future is going to be bigger and different than your audience that you have now. How do you sort of balance the feedback you're getting from the people that you're hearing that may keep you from reaching that bigger audience? If you know what I mean. I mean, it seems like there's sort of a risk there with who you get feedback from and how you change it.
That's true, but I think anyone who's willing to give feedback is someone I'm willing to listen to. It doesn't have to be someone I know as a close friend, although I mean usually it is. That's who I hear from the most. But if someone is willing to reach out and take the effort to say contact me through my website, that's a big deal. That's something I'll really pay attention to because um, that is, like I said, what I find most gratifying about writing and really about storytelling in general. That's one of my main aspirations in life is to be able to listen to people in that way. So even if it doesn't take me down the path I'm expecting, by absorbing as much of that as I can, I think it'll lead me to a place where I want to be.
That makes sense. What is your website?
My website is mylastname.com. So that's giedzinski.com. It's admittedly a bit ill maintained at this point, but it does have links to all the relevant places associated with my work.
That is really neat. And I should be getting 9 million mushrooms and more next week. So I'd
Cool.
be in a better position uh, to have a conversation on it after that.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. And I'd love to hear your review as well, your honest review.
Sure thing. Um, yeah, yeah, we should. We'll probably be running by each other a lot over the next year through the Space
Yeah,
Hero thing.
I hope so.
And I'm sure Space Hero itself is going to be a source of many stories.
Yes, and that's what I like the most about it, I think.
Have you thought about writing, going ahead and writing a story about what that winning contestant's like journey might be like?
I haven't quite done that, but I remember in the application, one of the questions was, if I were that person, what would I say in the 60 seconds before launch? And I remember having a lot of fun writing that passage. I thought, I don't know if I actually saved it because I think I submitted the application and then it was gone. But that is a story that I hope will be told.
Well, great. Well, Sam, I really appreciate your time, and it's so fascinating. I've really enjoyed the little preview I got to Blinkers, and look forward to um, getting to read it as soon as Amazon delivers it, which they're really quick. Was that a doorbell I heard? Not just
Yeah,
kidding.
that's how it
It
goes.
might. Of course, I think I could probably have gotten it on a Kindle as well. Hmm.
Yeah, I just recently released the ebook edition. I'd waited a long time to do that actually because I was really hoping people would enjoy the paperback more. Some people do prefer the ebooks, I know.
Yeah, I prefer physical books, but after moving a few bookcases this weekend, I think I might be shifting my tone a little as
Yeah, I can understand. It does become a lot of space.
it does. Well, Sam, thank you again so much, and I look forward to staying in contact and reading your writing.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me here and for doing this project. It's really inspiring to see your commitment to this and to telling so many people's stories.
also, I'm sending this to the moon on a micro SD card as part of Astrobotic's mission. So
Wow.
if you had any writings you wanted to send along, I have plenty of room on my 1 TB micro SD card.
All right. Thank you very much. That's quite the opportunity.
Okay, well, have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.